Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Springfield at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum, surrounded by Illinois' 4 presidents. From Illinois to the White House is the exhibit here at this museum now, and State Historian Stan Wheeler. This must have been a kick to put together in the 200th anniversary of the state.
It was a lot of fun to put together, Mark. Thanks so much for coming here. And when we were thinking about a good exhibit for the bicentennial, we decided to focus on the 4 presidents who once called Illinois home, and they're heavyweights.
Oh, they are? Okay,
That's
let's
right.
go through them. First one was Lincoln, of course.
Abraham Lincoln. That's right.
Then right over your shoulder, of course, U.S. Grant,
Ulysses
who
S.
shortly after Lincoln, he was one of Lincoln's main generals during the Civil War. And then as we move around, there's the seal, and then, of course, Ronald Reagan, who was born
The only president born in Illinois.
That's right. Yep. That's right. And then, of course, Barack Obama, who was born in Hawaii.
That's right.
And then moved to Illinois later on. But most of his career was in Chicago.
Yep.
So he called Illinois home for a long time.
That's right. So at the bicentennial, we had this question: what is it about Illinois that is able to provide such a springboard for these folks that go on to have such an important role in shaping the future of not just the state but the nation?
Yeah, and it all starts with in 1818, doesn't it?
Right.
With this document right here.
So, good bicentennial exhibit. We go all the way back to the beginning of Illinois statehood, and in August of 1818, the folks in Illinois wrote their first constitution, and this is the first constitution of the state of Illinois.
The very constitution.
The one.
It looks perfect. It's in perfect condition.
Yep. It's our friends at the Illinois State Archives allowed us to put it on display. It doesn't come out on display very often. It was the law of the land in Illinois when we became a state, and all the way until 1848 when the second constitution of Illinois went into effect. This represents a much different time in the state of Illinois, when Illinois was a very southern-leaning state. Most of the population had migrated up to Illinois from places like Virginia and Tennessee and Kentucky. A very southern-oriented state.
Can you imagine getting all this done in a brief amount of time? These days, it would never happen. It would take forever to get something like this done, wouldn't it?
That's right.
It's remarkable. It's such great condition. I can't believe it.
It's
200 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
So as we continue walking through this exhibit, the first area that we hit is coming to Illinois. We wanted to talk about each one of these presidents. What did their earliest moments in Illinois look like? And this is an amazing piece. This is the oldest document that still survives that documents Abraham Lincoln in Illinois. He moved here with his family in 1830. This is a petition that Abraham Lincoln signed in Illinois in 1831, and on line 24 on there, you can see the earliest example of Abraham Lincoln's signature.
You sure can, and it's very familiar. That same it looks the same on everything he's ever signed, doesn't it?
He had a remarkable ability to keep a pretty consistent pen.
And then there were 2 signatures underneath that he also signed in absentia for people who couldn't read or write. Huh?
Yeah, the line 25 is John Hanks, that's his cousin. The one underneath that on line 26 is John D. Johnston. That is Abraham Lincoln's stepbrother, and Lincoln signed their names for them on that petition.
Remarkable.
Yeah, the earliest moment there. This is a really fabulous piece. That, again, this comes from our collection here at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. At the top, this is a pawn ticket that Ulysses S. Grant signed on December 23rd, 1857. He signed it in St. Louis. Now, by this moment in Grant's life, he had been a West Point graduate. He had, been had a good experience in the Mexican War. He had had a military appointment. He was stationed out west, but he resigned. He had come back to St. Louis to live with his wife, his children, and tried to make a go of it as a farmer, and it was a failure. By this moment in Grant's career, he's selling firewood on the streets of St. Louis. And around Christmas time in 1857, he pawns his gold watch.
Oh, my goodness.
We've got the pawn ticket, so that tells me he probably didn't redeem it and get his gold watch back. He needed the $22 pretty badly.
$22.
Yeah, so it shows, sort of, it's not a great point in Grant's life. 2 years later, he moves to Illinois. He goes to work for his younger brothers in their tannery shop in Galena. of which we've got a little piece here. And so down on his luck, and then the Civil War happens. And Illinois provides opportunity for somebody with Grant's military experience, and Grant becomes a commander of men, and the rest is history. He goes on to save the Union, goes on to be a two-term president of the United States, and that story happens because Grant moved to Illinois.
That's true, that's true. And Lincoln could find great people, and he found Grant, didn't he? Grant was not an obvious choice for him. He had to find him.
Well, it was no lack of trying. Abraham Lincoln went through several generals before he found a general who saw the war and saw the conclusion of the war the same way he saw it. Ronald Reagan is the only president born in Illinois. This is his high school yearbook from
kidding.
Dixon High School.
And have you looked inside to see, are the pictures in there?
Absolutely, yeah. It's in remarkable condition.
Can you tell from, I mean, we can't touch it, of course. Can you tell immediately who Ronald Reagan is when you're looking?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
So we've got his freshman yearbook. When you hit it big, your freshman yearbook becomes a museum artifact.
And kind of embarrassing at some time, because you remember high school, right?
I remember it a little bit. This is a remarkable piece that documents, really, Barack Obama's move to Illinois. In 1989, he received this invitation from the law firm of Sidley Austin in Chicago, inviting the Harvard law student, Barack Obama, to serve an internship with their law firm in Chicago. Barack Obama does accept that offer, and that's where he meets a young attorney named Michelle Robinson at that law firm. And of course, they go on to get married.
It's a good thing he accepted that.
There you go.
Everything followed, didn't it?
So in our exhibit, we've got a wow item for every one of our presidents. And the first wow item you come to is Abraham Lincoln's briefcase from his presidency. When he got his cabinet together, every cabinet member received a beautiful little portfolio like this with their name embossed on the cover. This is Abraham Lincoln's. When he during the summertime, when the Lincoln family stayed in the soldiers' home outside of town, he would commute every morning to the White House. He brought this little satchel with him everywhere that he went. As he's staying up late at night at the soldiers' home, writing drafts of the Emancipation Proclamation or maybe the Gettysburg Address, this is the briefcase that he puts it in as he commutes to work the next day. As he's riding his horse down the street, the poet Walt Whitman is waving to Abraham Lincoln and greeting him. What I love about this piece, again, this comes from our collection. You lift up that flap, there is red wax all on the inside of there. That's how Lincoln would seal his letters, and some of that wax is still on there.
It staggers your imagination when you think about Lincoln probably wrote more of his own documents than any other president before or after, and that all of those found that as a home at some point.
Yeah, it's a remarkable piece of history and speaks to Abraham Lincoln's eloquence, and that's definitely a theme that you'll see come up again and again in this exhibit.
Well, Sam, the rail splitter, that was Lincoln's nickname, I guess, during a campaign. And we're looking at a rail splitter right now, or we were just a moment ago. This is actually Lincoln's he actually used this axe?
He used this axe, yeah. So the rail splitter nickname wasn't just a manufactured thing. As Abraham Lincoln says in his autobiography, he was raised to do farm work. He was raised to do manual labor. Doesn't mean he liked it, though. This axe is the last axe that Abraham Lincoln ever used. While he's on the front lines at the end of the Civil War in April of 1865, Abraham Lincoln comes up on some soldiers who are splitting their firewood for the night, and Mr. Lincoln borrows their axe. He splits the firewood for them. Those soldiers remarked on an old guy, 56 years old in 1865, not in the best of health, could still swing the axe pretty good. And they say something like this to Lincoln, and Lincoln supposedly holds this axe out at a shoulder's length, holds it there for about 30 seconds, and his arm doesn't quiver or anything. This is a sign of strength. And these soldiers really got a kick out of it. The soldiers saved the axe, handed it down, and then those descendants ended up donating it to our museum.
Man, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And of course, U.S. Grant he had a lot of interests in his life. One of them was a horsemanship. He was good on a horse, wasn't he?
He had an amazing rapport with animals and horses. Even from a very young age, Grant was known as a great horseman. Farmers from the surrounding area would bring their horses to Grant, and he would break them. He would figure out how these horses could be helpful on the farm, pulling a plow, for instance. This is the saddle that Ulysses S. Grant used in the closing months of the Civil War. Ulysses S. Grant actually used this saddle as he rode to Appomattox to receive Robert E. Lee's surrender, ending the Civil War. An absolutely amazing piece.
Yes, it is. Okay, so we go to football then. That's kind of a jump, isn't it?
Yeah, there you go. So, Ronald Reagan, he's got a background as a sports announcer. He would call Cubs games from Iowa, by the way. He would get, updates about the game through the telegraph,
and
through the wire.
He would call the action as he read it, huh?
He could recreate it. So I love that.
Yeah.
And then as president, he threw out the first pitch at a Cubs game. That's the jacket that he wore.
That's the very jacket.
Yep.
Okay.
He was. Ronald Reagan was a big believer in inviting the championship teams to the White House. This is a helmet when he invited the championship San Francisco 49ers to the White House.
Oh, man, it seems like they won every year except 85 in the 80s. They were winning all the time, weren't they?
I love Joe Montana.
Yeah,
he was my favorite.
I did too.
And of course, he invited the Chicago Bears when they won the Super Bowl to the White House. However, when they were supposed to come out, we had the Challenger disaster, the explosion. They had to cancel their trip. They never made it out to the White House. And so when Barack Obama was president, he remembered that good Chicago football team, and he invited those guys to the White House, and that's where that football comes from.
Oh, that's a neat story. That is a neat story. Okay, so he gave the team that each team member got one of those. I guess I'm not sure what that. And then there was, and of course, there's a picture, and Walter Payton, of course, was on that team.
Yeah, by that time, Walter Payton was no longer with us, unfortunately, and so they didn't want to forget him as well. He was such the heart and soul of that team. And then, of course, in this section, we talk about Barack Obama's interest in basketball. He writes about his interest in basketball really eloquently in his book, Dreams from My Father. Through basketball, he learns about himself, learns a little bit about his identity, loves the idea that when you're on a basketball court, it's all about your skills on the court. It has nothing to do with your background and who your father was, etc. And I think this is one of the greatest perks of being president of the United States. You get to have the presidential seal and your name on your Spalding basketball. That's pretty cool.
And he actually used it too, didn't it? This wasn't sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
This was bouncing around the gym at the White House.
That is a game-used ball.
Okay, and then back to Reagan again. And of course, Reagan will forever in history be tied with Gorbachev because at that time was the Soviet Union dissolved, and he'll forever be remembered for that.
Absolutely, and so this piece is one of the wow items from Ronald Reagan. This is a little sculpture that Mikhail Gorbachev gave to Ronald Reagan at the end of their 4 meetings as they were talking about bringing down the nuclear arsenal from each country. A beautiful piece, very symbolic with sort of jewels that come from Russia, and symbolizes really a new beginning that these countries can enjoy.
Sam, all these 4 presidents were very eloquent in their own way. They each had a way of communicating. And that's what this part of the exhibit specifies, isn't it? That each one of them had a real gift that way.
So Abraham Lincoln, we know about his eloquence. He penned the most well-known speech in world history in the Gettysburg Address. We have in this section some of the tools that he used as he was writing his most famous speeches. On the left, we have a goose quill pen. On the right, we have a gold pen-pencil combination. Both of these items were on Abraham Lincoln's desk when he was assassinated. Now, I think that was symbolic to Abraham Lincoln. The goose quill pen represents where he started in life, in the log cabin, out in the wilderness. The gold pen-pencil combination, it symbolizes what he achieved. President of the United States, one of the most powerful men in the world at the time of his death. That's the American dream. Doesn't matter your start in life, you can accomplish anything in America. That's what he told soldiers during the Civil War, why this war is worth fighting for. And then, of course, we have his inkwell that he used as he was writing the first inaugural address, when he was really pleading with Southerners to remember the better angels of their nature and not choose war.
Now, Grant was not known as a great writer in his career, but as a historian, you find out later that after his presidency, that he becomes a great writer.
Yeah, so during Grant's life, you know, it is remarkable to go back and look at his writings when he's in the field during battle. His orders have a clarity that is pretty remarkable. There's not a lot of adjectives and adverbs in the things that he's writing, but there's action verbs. He uses that same technique as at the very end of his life, as he is really, he's lost his life's fortune and he's dying of throat cancer, a very painful death. He signs a contract with Mark Twain's publishing company to pen his memoirs. And what he produces is a 275,000 word memoir that has gone down as one of the treasures in American literature. It's known as the best autobiography ever written by an American president.
And this is a man that didn't do much writing during his career, but he could. He could, yeah.
Never set out to be a writer, but man, he produced a masterpiece.
Was that book one of the first editions, the one that you had there?
Yes, the first edition of his memoirs. So Ronald Reagan, we've already talked about Ronald Reagan in this exhibit in the sense that he was an actor. He knew how to deliver a line, and we also touched on his background with Mikhail Gorbachev during his presidency. This document right here combines all those things. This is a speech card that Ronald Reagan used. You can see he's underlining, he's putting little marks within the speech to remind him to pause. He wants to make sure that he delivers those lines as effectively as possible. And if you look in the middle of that speech card, he calls on Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Yes.
That is the speech card he used as he delivered that speech.
That was sitting right on his lectern,
right
that very card.
That's right.
Oh, man. Boy, it's priceless. It's priceless.
So Barack Obama, during his presidency, we certainly know about what an ability he had to deliver a speech. Yeah. This is an early draft of the speech that he gave in 2015 as he talked at Selma. Probably a staffer wrote a draft of this speech after he had talked to the president and gotten some of his ideas. And you can see in this early draft, the president cared deeply about what he was going to say, and he marked this draft up with a lot of notes.
I want to look at this fourth page right here. You can see right here, get my shadow out of the way, but you can see right here how much that he made this in his own style.
Very hands-on, absolutely.
And then not only that, but I like to go back to the first page there, Sam, because what you say is, okay, now we know that he has seen this because he stamped it, didn't he, back at the top?
Yeah, it's been stamped back from the oval.
On the top right, yeah.
Yeah, somebody would have to go in and put all of these corrections into a new draft to give him a clean copy.
Well, I'm glad to see that you know, that the speechwriters don't do everything.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. So this is one of our wow items, and this one is for Ulysses S. Grant, and hold your hat because this one is a wow item. This is the table that was in Wilmer McLean's parlor at Appomattox. As Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant met, Robert E. Lee signed the surrender of his forces on this table. Signed them over, gave the paper back to Ulysses S. Grant, bringing the Civil War to a virtual end. This is an amazing piece of American history. After Lee left, after Grant left, the soldiers tried to collect souvenirs from that room, and they paid the owner $40 for this table.
For the table.
They wanted a real symbol of the end of the Civil War, and they cleaned out that parlor. McLean's little girl actually had, she didn't clean up her toys. She had a little doll lying in that room. One of the soldiers took the doll as a silent reminder of the end of the Civil War.
Amazing. Where does that table live now?
It's at the Chicago History Museum. Our friends up in Chicago were able to loan that piece to us. Mark, this is a great photo op here. Now, a lot of people ask, how does a teleprompter work? What's it like to use a teleprompter as you're giving a speech? And so we built a presidential podium here, complete with a teleprompter. Great photo op. And that teleprompter, if you look closely at the words that it's displaying, those are the words to Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Now, of course, Abraham Lincoln didn't have a teleprompter that day. He had to read from a sheet of paper. But our presidents in the 20th and 21st century, they're able to use the teleprompter.
They sure are. Okay, now it's starting again for us. fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, and on it goes to the complete Gettysburg Address. Fascinating. Sam, this wedding dress is part of the collection of the library and museum, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right. It's part of our permanent collection, and in this section, we're talking about each of the first ladies. And so we start with Mary Lincoln, and so we put on display her wedding dress. And it's an amazing object here in our collection. Mary Lincoln had a stormy courtship with Abraham. She went to her sister's house one day here in Springfield, and she says, "I'm getting married." And she says, "Who are you marrying?" And she said, "Abraham Lincoln." Well, she had thought they had broken up.
Yeah.
And Mary says, "No, you know, we're back together. When are you getting married?" Mary says, "Today." And so Mary borrows her sister Frances's wedding skirt, and Sister Elizabeth puts together a wedding, and they say when Abraham and Mary cut into the wedding cake, it was still warm.
Not a lot of preparations went into that one. It is a simple dress.
Yep.
And Mary, as I recall, Mary liked fancy things, and this is a very simple dress. So it's what she could find to get married in.
It's what she found to get married in, sure. And you know, during the presidency, as you say, Mary was known, you know, really for her fashion. And we have a dress that dates from the presidency in our collection as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, another lady that was very fashionable, Michelle Obama, and she was known throughout the fashion world as being somebody everybody wanted to dress, didn't they?
Absolutely. So this is a dress that Michelle Obama wore on the cover of Parade magazine. And you know, when I was showing a couple through this exhibit a few weeks ago, the lady remarked to me, "You know, everyone looks great in that color blue." I didn't know that, so I thought that was interesting.
And there's also her attorney oath.
Yeah.
Is here, and I guess every attorney in the state of Illinois has to sign an oath in front of the Supreme Court.
That's right. Yeah, we talked about Michelle being a attorney earlier in the exhibit, and yeah, that's her attorney oath that we were able to borrow from the Supreme Court of Illinois.
Now, this is really sweet over here. We've got a letter from President Reagan. Well, he wasn't president yet. He was elected, but he was not yet president.
Yeah.
This is a Christmas letter telling Nancy how much he loves her in December before he's inaugurated, right?
Yeah.
And this is in his very hand.
It's in his hand, and it removes any doubt in your mind. How much did Ronald Reagan love Nancy? It's a real masterpiece.
Can I read some of it?
Please do.
Okay, I'm going to read this fourth paragraph, or this third paragraph, because it's just too dear to pass up. He says, "You see, I have this problem. I miss you when you first leave the room. I worry about you when you go out the front door. Now, this isn't good for me, not since my transplant, you into my heart 29 years ago next March. Without you, there would be no sun, no moon, no stars. With you, they all come out at the same time."
My goodness. Now, how do you like that?
I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And you have in this exhibit, you have also a movie poster of Ronald, and you tell me this is the only movie poster that has Ronald and Nancy Davis together.
Hellcats of the
bottom.
Navy. Yeah, they were both in that film, Ronald Reagan and Nancy Davis. It's the only movie poster that we have found where they are both on there.
That's priceless too.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, and then from that, which is sort of, which is very uplifting, to this, which is very depressing, of course, you told us about General Grant, or President Grant's long and painful death.
That's right. He's dying of throat cancer as he pens his memoirs because he wants to leave a legacy behind for his family. You know, he suffers through that experience. 3 days after he writes the final sentence of his memoirs, he passes away. And, you know, his final wishes, where do you want to be buried, Grant? You want to be buried at West Point, you want to be buried at, you know, all these other places. He turns all those down, and he says that he wants to be buried next to Julia, his wife. And of course, he's buried today in New York City in the beautiful mausoleum. These are the Bibles that Julia took out. These are her personal Bibles that she used to rest Ulysses S. Grant's head on during his funeral. A really poignant reminder of the beauty of their relationship. This section, we talk about how Illinois supported our 4 Illinois presidents, and I'm happy to report Illinois voted for. They went for each one of their native sons in the elections. This is one of my favorite pieces, Mark. This is a piece produced for the Barack Obama campaign. It's got Abraham Lincoln wearing an Obama 08 t-shirt. I think that's pretty clever. But it also illustrates an important point that anyone who's going to run for president from Illinois, you're always going to run in Abraham Lincoln's shadow.
Yeah.
How do you grapple with that legacy? And Barack Obama was able to use the Lincoln legacy as effective as anyone.
He really did, and you know, he had those visits to the old state capitol, which was very effective, and he really did tie himself to the Republican president very well, didn't he?
I was there that day when he announced his he was running for president. That was the coldest day that I remember.
Oh, it was awful, and a lot of people still showed up, didn't they?
Oh man, it was packed. It was great to see.
Now this has an interesting history because you knew this existed, but you couldn't find it. You wanted it, but you couldn't find it.
That's right. So in the exhibit, we've had a wow item for every president, and we were thinking about what could be a wow item we could use for Barack Obama, and we thought, wouldn't it be neat if we got a hold of a Grammy that he won? He actually won 2 Grammys. And so we asked the Obama folks that are putting together, you know, the Barack Obama Presidential Center in Chicago, is it possible we could get a Grammy? And you know, we couldn't get them to commit for the longest time. Well, it turns out they didn't know exactly where the Grammy was. And it took them actually working with the president himself to find out which box, which storage locker, where is this thing located. And less than a week before we opened, we were able to get this Grammy, which I just get a huge kick out of. This is the Grammy that Senator Obama in 2005 won for the audiobook for Dreams from My Father. What a neat piece.
Yeah, it really is.
It speaks to his eloquence and also speaks to the 21st century.
Sam Wheeler, thanks so much for conceiving all this with your team and for letting us come in early in the morning when nobody's here to take a look at it for our audience. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you guys for coming.
Appreciate it. Now, Illinois, from Illinois to the White House, featuring the 4 Illinois presidents will be here at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum through the end of the year. And remember, it's the 200th anniversary of Illinois, so you want to get down here and see this. With another Illinois story in Springfield, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send 1995 to P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.